On this week's video version of our podcast, Trail Cam Radio, we sit down with Mike Perry from Erie, Pennsylvania. Mike is a white-tailed deer hunter that has been chasing deer in New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio for many years. We sit down and talk all about some of his tactics and things that he's seen and learned over the years. Really good podcast. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you want to keep seeing more of these video version of our podcast, be sure to hit that like button and let us know in the comments, and let's get into the episode.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
Ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
Well, we are live, Trail Cam Radio listeners. We are sitting down with Mike Perry. We just had the opportunity to come in and shoot an episode of Whitetail Cribs. Pretty phenomenal game room, trophy room, whatever you want to call it. I'm actually sitting, 10 feet away from a full body mount, 170, 180 inch deer out of the state of New York, which you don't hear often. So, Mike, we're in Northwest Pennsylvania. There's not a lot of guys in this area that have deer like this. So for all of our listeners, YouTube watchers, Trail Cam Radio listeners, give them a brief bio or tell us who you are.
Okay.
I guess.
All right. My name's Mike Perry. I've been bow hunting since 1987. I started deer hunting on the family farm here back when I was a kid in 1977. It was a big deal to shoot any kind of buck back then. Between my uncles, my grandfather, and my dad, they killed a total of 4 bucks ever until I started hunting. So, when I started stacking them up, they were pretty impressed.
So brought up in a hunting family, like just as tradition, you were probably taught by your grandfather, father, uncles, just like everybody else?
Yeah, they were pretty much small game hunters, but they would hunt during gun season. So I really only knew that you sat on a log and waited for deer to walk by. That was basically what I was taught as far as deer hunting. So then I started doing it on my own. When I was like 21 or 22, I started bow hunting in '87. So
give us your whitetail, I guess, resume. I mean, we're sitting in here. There's probably 20 shoulder mounts, 1 full body mount somewhere. There's a pile of sheds. There's a bunch of Euros. A pretty impressive body of work.
Well, I couldn't really tell you how many deer I've killed. It used to be real important to me when I was young. I kept track of everything. In fact, I have photo albums with numbered how many buck, how many doe, how many turkey. And then when I got up into the hundreds, then I kind of lost track of it. But I've always hunted several states and got as many tags as I could. We enjoy the venison, so I'm always trying to kill as many deer as I legally can, and I consider myself a deer hunter, not just a bow hunter, not just a gun hunter, not a trophy hunter, just that I'm a deer hunter.
Yeah. There was, while we were doing this Whitetail Cribs thing, so anyone listening that either, I'm not sure if this is going to air before your Cribs episode or after, but anyone listening, please make sure that you go watch the Cribs episode, because there are several points or descriptions of different stories where you're cutting tracks, following deer to beds, shooting them in their beds, hunting pinch points or funnels during the rut. They're not. That was one thing that I picked up on very quick as you were, I guess, describing some of the stories of these harvests, that you are anything but one-dimensional.
Yes, I try to have as many methods as possible, not just weapons, but I hunt a lot of different situations. I try to find things that work for me, and then I try to duplicate them on other properties. So I'll actually go and look for that type of situation so that I have several places I can go to, and I'm not burning spots out.
So for you, growing up, is that like a trial and error type thing, or is that, in today's world, it's digital. You listen to podcasts, you go to watch YouTube videos, and there's a lot of information out there, but I'm assuming that wasn't the case?
No, the learning curve for me was tough. I mean, when I started bow hunting, you had North American Whitetail, a handful of books that were written deer and deer hunting, and I would read all the articles I could and try to sift through the tea leaves. And a lot of it was just good in theory, but it didn't work either in my situation or maybe not at all. And I learned everything through trial and error. I mean, and as well as all my friends. And there's some of the best deer hunters that you're ever going to meet are some of my buddies, and they all have bucks like this. And they've been doing the same thing. Everybody learned through trial and error, talking to each other, keeping in touch. Hey, this is working, that's working. And then with the advent of the trail camera, it just changed everything. It just made hunting so much easier. So the learning curve for the guys coming up now is, not to take anything away from them, but it's a lot easier for sure.
Less sweat equity, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in 1989, 1990, you didn't know if there was a big buck where you were hunting at, other than if you found some big rubs or if you saw some big tracks. But as far as that goes, you don't know if that buck was a buck that now I'm realizing that these bucks are moving through an area off another farm, or, they're on the farm for just 1 week, or they live there all year long. I mean, you didn't know that back then.
Yeah.
All you knew was that a big buck made a rub, and that there's a big track and there's a big buck somewhere, but you have no idea where, when, or why. You just have to try to start deciphering all that on your own.
Well, really, those are the three questions that, we talked to whitetail hunters all across the country. We just did, we had Dan Baez, also from Northwest Pennsylvania, in the office on Monday. And that was one of the things that we talked about, what is his when, where, and why? Like when you find or you're hunting a specific deer. Dan's big on, growing deer and trying to hunt a specific deer, trying to answer those kind of few questions. So it's good that you kind of brought that up. But there's a couple of things I guess I want to talk about, and they're specific to a couple of deer that you killed here. I guess one, tell us about the process of when you learn to start cutting tracks and like follow them back to a bed.
Well, I pretty much started that because this is the snow belt of Pennsylvania, and we get a lot of snow. And I realized when I first started hunting real heavily in the late 80s that I needed to scout when the season was over to figure things out. And there's always a ton of snow on the ground around here. We get 180, 200 inches of snow every winter here. And so I just started backtracking in the bedding areas just by pure accident. I mean, I guess now that I've listened to people like Dan Infalt and others that, we were all basically doing the same thing in the same time frame and all learning probably the same ways. And what I would do is I'd just follow deer tracks back. I'd try to find the biggest tracks I could find and try to find all the bedding areas. I backed in for a couple of years. I walked around with a soft tape in my hand, and I tape measured every bed that I found so that I could figure out which ones were the biggest beds. I tape measured their tracks, and I took advantage of the snow to learn the lay of the land. Now I know that it's not always going to help you hunting. Sign you're finding in March might, from the previous, like say a snowstorm in March or February may not help you at all when November comes around. But, it definitely is a piece of the puzzle. Deer are always there's predators of deer for, there's all coyotes, whatever, cars, there's always something trying to kill a deer. So they're always on alert. So I feel like there's always some sort of pattern. So anything you can learn about a deer, whether it's fall, summer, spring, whatever, you might be able to use that to help kill that deer later on.
So I guess postseason scouting was a big part of your progression as a whitetail hunter. Sitting here in July, what is like now as an accomplished whitetail hunter, what do your summer months look like? I mean, it's legal to come out and shine, I guess, in Pennsylvania. Are you still out shining bucks? Are you running trail cameras? Are you glassing fields? Like what does that look like for you?
Okay, well, back in the day, I would sit on edges of fields all summer long and downwind and watch deer come out in the fields. I don't do that anymore. I wish I could, but because of my job and the hours I work, in the evenings, I just can't, it's just not feasible for me. So most of my summer scouting involves trail cameras. Will spot, like on my nights off, take the boys out, take a ride, look for deer. But most of it is trail cameras, and that way I'm not in the woods a lot. I'm not leaving scent behind, and I can let the cameras do the work for me. It kind of feels like it's cheating a little bit, but hey, I'll take it.
No, any advantage we can get, they're hard enough to kill with all the advantages that we have.
Definitely.
Let alone not having these things. So, you mentioned Dan Infalt and scouting or cutting tracks and scouting, kind of trying to figure out the bedding structure. the beast style or mobile style of hunting is really, like, in the last 5 years, just, I mean, it's absolutely exploded. Like, everybody wants to hunt beds. Everybody wants to be mobile. Everybody wants to follow in Andre and Dan's and Cody or whoever's footsteps, How long did it take you to understand, because you said you've kind of found you start doing that by accident.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to really find success, with that tactic as far as like cutting a track and tracking a deer back to a specific or a certain bedding area and being able to kill that deer?
Well, like I said, when I was talking earlier, when we were doing the whitetail cribs, I started getting success in the first couple of years with shooting a few mature bucks. I talked about how I found my first buck bed because I had was hunting a certain buck over in Ohio, and he stood up in front of me, and I watched how smart he was. As soon as I seen him stand up, I went down, and then he stood there till the car started coming down the road. Then he bedded back down. Then when the car went by, he stood back up and went along with his business. I noticed that he was bedding right by where I was parking, and the only reason why I knew it was a buck bed is because you could see the bed and there was shavings in it, so you could tell he was laying there and rubbing his rack against the bottom of the trees. So yeah, it progressed slowly, but I started putting those things together. That with reading a few articles about hunting transitions. Thank God I read that a long time ago because I never knew what a transition was for the first 3 or 4 years I hunted. Then I started realizing that where these habitats come together, those are the places where the deer are bedding the most, and that's the best place to hunt, in my opinion, is real close to where they're bedding. It used to be taboo. Don't hunt in a bedding area. You would read articles about it. Do not hunt in a bedding area. And I was telling people, that's a bunch of bull, You got to hunt in a bedding area if you want to kill a buck, especially a big one, because you're not going to see them if you don't, other than deer in a rut when anything goes,
Right. Yeah, that was, I guess I grew up as a deer hunter growing up, like in the mid to late 90s, like TV and some of the bigger, North American Whitetail and some of the bigger publications, and you saw TV hunters. And one of the things that I had a hard time overcoming was, and you talked about this in the Cribs episode, but I had a hard time going into the woods and hunting. The wind's blowing right in my face, like having a wind dead at your face, and trying to figure out like why these deer aren't showing up. And you mentioned, a specific story of, I think it was the 8.5-year-old that you killed?
Yeah.
Was it the 8.5-year-old buck? That was the deer that taught you how to let the deer have the wind, like hunt the deer when the deer has the wind. So, I guess explain or elaborate your thoughts on that.
In 2014, I started hunting that buck. I started getting pictures of him in 2012. In 2014, I was running a lot of cameras, like I still do. And I was trying to kill this buck in this railroad trestle. And I kept, every time I'd go there with the right wind blowing right in my face, or cutting, my back, my one way or the other on my front side, and I could never get that buck to come anywhere near me during daylight. But when I'd go check my cameras, every time the wind was blowing out of the north or the northeast or the northwest, I'm hunting with the south, the southwest, southeast wind, thinking that, okay, he's got to come this way. And then the days that the wind was opposite, and because of the way the situation was, where it was like a ravine, so I couldn't get on the other side, I thought, without spooking them, because of it wasn't the tree for the stand or whatever. But I noticed that he was walking through this area with the wind that was totally wrong for my setup, totally right for him. And he was always walking with a crosswind, like a nose wind. And big bucks, I've seen him walk with tailwinds. I've seen him walk with nose winds. I've seen him, crosswinds, whatever. But this buck liked to walk with a crosswind. So I knew that I was going to have to, if I wanted to kill him, I'm going to have to figure out a way to kill him on a crosswind or with the wind going right towards him. So as I learned more about high pressure and just on my own, I've been floating the milkweed stuff too for several years. I just did it because I was cheap. I didn't want to buy the bottles of stuff, and I was floating them, and now, gosh, I don't go anywhere without it. When I'm scouting, I have it. But it's a great tool, and I learned over time that when the sun's out and it's cold, and a lot of times that air will rise. And I started thinking, not only did I notice it was happening in the mornings a lot, you would get rising thermals, that, if you had high pressure, you would get it. So I was just kind of putting this stuff together. And then when I started hearing these other people talk about it the last few years, it just verified, what I already had known, just through trial and error over time.
So was that deer was coming in using a crosswind, you had said.
Yep.
Was there I guess at any point with that crosswind where you were nervous of, I guess, him catching your scent cone? Like, because there's guys talk about like slicing the pie or giving the deer the wind until they get to a certain point, and then when he hits that certain point, the game's the gig's up.
I try that in funnels a lot of times if I'm hunting like a funnel situation. In fact, this past year, not to try to get off the subject of that deer too much, but this past year, I had a really good day on the 7th of November and saw 10 different bucks and almost killed a 150s, but I had a mishap with the bow at the last moment, and I didn't realize my arrow came off the rest and got between the riser and the rest. So when he walked under me, I shot, and the arrow went flying a whole other direction. But and that was one of my top 3 bucks. I had 2 of my top 3 bucks within bow range and didn't get either one of them, and I only got a shot at that one buck. The other one I couldn't get a shot off at him.
I feel your pain.
But anyhow, that buck that we're getting back to the buck from 2018 that I shot, I definitely felt nervous about it. Okay. I was worried that he was going to catch me, even though I knew that my wind was floating over him. But like I was saying before, like when I get this wasn't a funnel situation, but in a funnel situation, a lot of times I will let the wind, I'll give up one side of the funnel. Like I'll totally give up to one side and just hope that they're coming down the other side. I mean, that was the situation that day. I had 10 bucks, 6 of them walked right within 12 yards of me, and several of them came from downwind. Now, the wind was blowing enough, and I was on the edge of a creek, and it was carrying my scent. I couldn't get a stand right on the creek like I normally would for the water thermals, but it must have been enough pull that it was pulling my scent away. That buck I was talking about that I had the mishap with the bow, he came with a total tailwind. Now, that's a 5-year-old buck I've been getting pictures of for several years, and he walked with a tailwind straight down. He was the last buck I saw, and it was like 5 o'clock in the evening. But, a lot of times when I'm hunting a funnel situation, I will try to let the wind, like you said, quarter just off so that I can get a shot at them. Say they're coming from the north, and I got to get the shot before they get to the southeast of me, something like that. I mean, I don't mind doing it because the worst that can happen is you blow the deer out of there. I mean, I'm hunting several bucks every year.
Right.
So if I blow one out, I'm not going to really worry about it. And the other thing is I really am not someone who thinks that just because you blow a deer out that you're never going to see this buck again. I mean, these deer are smart, but we give them way too much credit. Than too many people worried about making the move. I mean, I'm aggressive. I don't care if I blow a deer out. I'm not afraid to walk around and leave my scent around if I have to, because if you have to get the intel to figure out how to kill the buck, you ain't gonna kill him if you don't try.
Right.
So I will try, and if I blow that and nothing happens with that deer and he stops showing up for whatever reason, I'm just gonna go to the next one.
With that aggressive mindset, are you like going in and hunting buck beds and that sort of thing, like Dan and like the bump and dump, like Cody and Andre and talk about? No,
I don't do that. I mean, in fact, I hunt bedding areas, and I've always hunted bedding areas, but I've never actually even thought about hunting a specific buck bed other than when it's gun season, because I just figured you'd never get close enough to them. And now when I started hearing about the hunting beast and what those guys were doing, then I thought, I'm going to try and do this. Now, I mean, I was hunting mobile when mobile wasn't cool, so I've been doing this for a long friggin' time, and I thought about it, but I never did it. Now with the problem with it is with my job I've had for the last 15 years, I have to be to work at 8 o'clock at night, and it's tough to get set up on a buck bed in the evening and tear down standing sticks, or if I'm in my climber, no matter what it is, and get back to the truck and get home and get to work, get my lunch and all that stuff, and then go to work, which is 25 miles from my house. You know what I mean? So I just don't hunt specific buck beds very often. I want to know where every buck bed is, but I'm not really hunting buck beds. Now, maybe when I retire, I can do that or whatever, or get a new job. You know what I mean? But right now, it's just not feasible. And my kids are hunting now. One's 10 and one's 12. So in October, these guys are fair weather. These two, my wrecking crew, they don't want to go out in the cold. So, I got to take them in early October, mid-October if I want to get them out in the woods. So that's what I do.
Got it. There's a lot of guys talk about hunting specific beds, but I think more and more people are starting to take your approach as far as, okay, let's go in and scout this bedding area, figure out how the deer are using it, and then hunt the bedding area versus going in and trying to hunt a specific deer on a specific bed. One of the things that you mentioned the tailwind, deer using tailwinds. Is that something that you've seen a lot? Because not a lot of people talk about that. There's guys that have talked about it, I guess, and I think we've all probably heard or have seen maybe one or two deer use a tailwind. But primarily guys are saying deer are going to quarter into the wind, or they like a crosswind, or deer likes the wind dead in his nose. So
here's my theory on it. Okay, when it comes to a tailwind, if you think about it, in reality, a buck has no idea that a human is going to be in front of them. You know what I mean? That everything that's coming after them is following them. Everything that they find with their nose. So it only makes sense that a deer would think that danger is going to come from his backside. So to me, a buck walking with a tailwind is totally makes sense because he can smell anything that's behind him, trailing him, which is what a predator would do. And he can see out in front of him. And I've witnessed mature bucks walk with a tailwind, many times over the years. I'm not saying it's the only way they do it. I mean, we all know we have cameras. We can see what they're doing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But bucks will definitely walk with a tailwind, and so I'm not afraid to hunt. Like I said, that day, November 7th, this past year in 2019, I gave up the whole north. Now my wind was staying over the trail, but I mean, I was in a 20-yard, 25-yard pinch point, and the wind was blowing just a little bit out of the northwest. And I didn't bother me at all. I sat there from sun up to sundown, and I had fell in the creek on my way in, and my waders were full of water. I had to take them off, squish them out, take off one of my long underwear shirts, put it down inside of my boot, and I sat there all day long. I hunt all day during the rut.
Right.
I noticed that a lot of the people you guys have had on shoot their deer in October, which is great. I mean, I wish I could hunt more in October, but just for me, it works out better to hunt in November and take my vacation in. So I'm the total opposite. A lot of my bucks have been shot between like the 2nd and the 10th of November, somewhere in that area. I mean, I notice there's a lot of really big buck movement in the areas that I hunt in October and late October, from about the 24th to 25th on. A lot of these bucks start showing up around the 18th of October on the cameras that don't live on the farm. And then, and if you could hunt every night, then that would be good. But I get 2 weeks, I have 4 weeks vacation. I got to spend a couple weeks with the family, so I'll take 2 weeks. And I hunt the run. I just go with my highest odds.
No, that makes sense. I want to, I guess, dive into the wind topic a little bit. Everyone's trying, I guess not everyone, but there's more and more people trying to hunt specific deer, trying to figure out when a deer is using an area, what kind of wind, and try to, I guess, maximize the odds of that deer showing up based on weather conditions, whether that's a cold front moving in, moon transit times or moon phase, and wind direction and wind speed. So how are you figuring out, like when you're going into a pitch point or some type of rut funnel, whether it's terrain feature, beaver dam, whatever, wooden pinch, how are you figuring out, okay, I want to give up this wind or this portion of the pinch based on the wind? Like how are you is it just a judgment call on the sign that you're seeing?
Well, a lot of it is I'm using historical data. So what I do is, I have several places I hunt, and I try to add at least 1 or 2 funnels every year. What I'll do is I'll put a camera out, and I'll let it sit there all year, especially on the public. And that way, if the camera's still there, when March comes around, I know if there was any hunters in there, then I'll know how many guys were walking through it. I'll know what kind of doe travel. That's my main thing. I want to know how many doe are traveling through that funnel. And I want to know, of course, that mature bucks feel comfortable walking through there. But what I do is I'm looking for doe bedding on each end of the funnel. So I guess you're asking me, how do I figure out what side I want to give up or whatever? It just depends on the situation. I'm using the historical data. I know which ways the deer are going through. I'm usually hunting places where I've had cameras at, so I'm using that information. Like I would say, trail cameras is the main thing. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess let's fast forward, or I guess diverge off of the bed, the scouting, and like kind of the wind tactics. What are you're scattered across a couple different states, super busy guy. So how are you using cameras for inventory? Obviously, you just said annual data, so that plays to us that plays a big portion into your rut tactics, rut stands, when deer are showing up on scrapes, that sort of thing. But how else are you using your trail cameras?
Well, I use them in the summertime, for inventory, of course. In Ohio, you can put out mineral. Actually, in PA, you can put out mineral, but it has to be out by a certain time, so you can't hunt that area, blah, blah, blah. It's nice in Ohio. You can put it out, and if your mineral site's still there, when you're hunting, it's not it's not a problem. But yeah, in the summertime, that's what I'm doing, using it for inventory. And then I'm running it in areas, all year long. I'm running like 50 cameras, so I'm just using that information to learn where I need to hunt. I put them on scrapes. Once we get out of summertime here and the apples start dropping, I mean, that's the first thing I start moving my cameras to. When I start seeing apples getting ready to drop, I'm moving cameras into apple trees. And then when I start finding, I actually not finding scrapes, I'm going to scrapes that I know over time that I've either found scouting in the late season or during the season or what have you, and I'll go put my my cameras up over those scrapes. And I'm trying to, it might be a scrape on the edge of the field, just want to know that there, what bucks are around, and that would be a scrape that I wouldn't be hunting, of course. Or I'm going to put it on a primary scrape, back right off of a bedding area, and always try to put those ones up in the trees.
Yep.
Because some of these bucks, just like you said with the Tailwind, they're individuals. Some bucks, they're going to do what they want to do. And, some deer are camera shy, and some deer will stand in front of that camera and let you get pictures of it all day long so you can go nuts trying to figure out why it doesn't come by when you're hunting. But, so that's basically what I'm doing there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I guess break down the time of year. So you have your soft mass food dropping, so you're moving your cameras basically from food to food, and then third week of October maybe, or is that when you start to focus on pre-rut type activity or locations?
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, the way I do it is I like to hunt first. Closest to bedding area is the first food that's close to a bedding area. So say it's apple trees or it's acorns or something like that. That's where I'm going to go to first. And I don't want to go in there and be, checking all my cameras constantly. So I'll let it ride for a little while. But usually what I do when I said I take my vacation, usually I'll start around the 25th of October and I'll go up to around the 10th of November, somewhere in that area. And what I end up doing is I hunt. Most of the places I hunt, I section it off kind of like in my mind. I don't say, okay, this is 10 acres and this is, just according to the habitat. So if there's field involved or a bunch of stuff that I think isn't huntable, I'll make that piece bigger. And I'll have several cameras in each area of the farm. So say it's like my lease that I'm hunting over in Ohio. There's 500 acres, 250 on each side of the road. I dice that up into different sections, and I'll put 3 or 4 cameras in each section. And then when it's time for me to hunt, what I'll do is I'll hop and we have a lot of stands set up, but I hunt mobile a lot of times too on that farm even. And, but I have other friends hunting with me, so we have a lot of stands set up. But anyhow, I'll just hunt one section, check the cameras, see what's been happening. Go to the next section. Of course, you take everything into consideration, right. Wind, whatever. And just kind of like hop around. That's basically how when I ended up shooting that buck we were talking about before in 2018, Boss Hog, he hadn't been on the farm until the 25th of October, I think it was. He showed up first picture. And then I knew, okay, he was here this day. And then I went and hunted that section. Now I missed him. I didn't miss him with the bow. I missed him by a day or two. Right. Then I hunted another section, and okay, he was here on this day. And then I'm like, so now I know where he's at. So I'm hopping around trying to get in front of him. And I do that with, several different bucks throughout the year on different properties. You know, just try to basically hunt them down. And if I got access, real good access, then I'll keep going to that spot if I think that I'm going to kill him there. Right. Like I did with that one buck I was telling you about on a different farm over in Ohio.
Gotcha. So that historical data is coming in pretty big. That's what we do in the big woods. We try to use that historical data, but I guess when the deer showing up back on we say big woods, big timber. It's giant tracts of land. 500 acres is big for a lot of people, but it still might not encompass that entire home range of that whitetail if he's living on one corner of the farm or the one edge or whatever. So him coming back through October 25th, is that something that you see, I guess, often? Maybe deer leaving their summer range and relocating, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, over in Ohio, especially in these swamps that I hunt here in Pennsylvania, I noticed that the bucks aren't around in the summertime very often. I don't know if it's because of all the biting flies and the mosquitoes and all that keeps them out of there. Now the does seem to stay in there, and but when it comes to the bucks, they just seem to be somewhere else, wherever the best food is, I'm sure. But you can't be on everybody's property, and so it's a guessing game. But I noticed that a lot of the bucks aren't around the summertime, so they start shifting in. Some of them will come in right after the velvet comes off. So you'll start picking up pictures of them sometime in September. I noticed the majority of the bucks that I seem to be hunting, it seems like their home ranges are all overlapping. So, they're coming through. I don't know if you'd say it's actually just they're on some sort of circle pattern where they're coming through. I mean, some of these bucks, they'll only be there for a certain week. Some of them might be there every third day or eighth day or whatever, And when you're on that one farm, we have so many cameras. There's 4 of us, and we all have our cameras in there. You got so many cameras in there. There's nothing hardly getting through there without you knowing about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And some of those bucks are going to be there every day. Some of those bucks are going to be there every once a week, and some of them only come there once a year. You know what I mean? It's just all on the individual, how big their loop is that they're traveling, and what else did you want to know about that? Sorry.
No, we're jumping around pretty good, but there's a lot of stuff I kind of want to get a 30,000 foot view. So with those, what's your take on guys talk about the home range of deer shrinking and those loops getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and while they're harder to kill, they're easier to hunt?
I feel like when they get older, they do actually shrink down because, that's what I've noticed, especially the last few years. I've been hunting specific bucks, that I've had data with for several years, you know what I mean? And I noticed that they not only do they seem to stay in a smaller area, but they also seem to move more during daylight, which is odd to me. But I've noticed that with that buck I called Super Freak and Boss Hog, that both of them seemed like more as they got older, which I don't know why. Not that they were really particularly aggressive deer or whatever. It's just they seem to be moving more.
Now, was that data being collected in the same core area, and then you noticed the daylight activity increasing in that same area, or is it just you shrinking down the area that the deer is? Yeah,
definitely. Well, moving my cameras over the years accordingly to the areas that I know that they would frequent every once in a while, and then you would catch more. As you go, you're adding more cameras, and then of course, because you have more, maybe that's why you're getting more of the data.
Yeah, that's.
But also that's showing you that they're out more during daylight. And you're seeing their travel pattern basically. That they're only moving from here to here. Like for instance, that buck. I keep going back to that buck from 2018, the 8.5-year-old. I never ever got a picture of that buck across the road. 250 acres over there, full of acorns and a big clear cut that runs the whole border of it, the Amish own, and he never once showed up on a camera over there. Now I had cameras running there for years and years. He stayed on the one side of the road for whatever reason, and then I noticed he was staying in a smaller area as he got older, and he was staying, right down along the creek. And I don't want to say too much because some guy will call me up tomorrow and tell me he knows exactly where I was at. But
yeah, don't give out any details. No details here.
Well, let me say something real quick because when we were talking before. When it comes to when you're asking about, the keeping track of the bucks and this and that, well, you also want to make sure you keep track of the does, because one thing I noticed about the does is they stay in a smaller area. They're way more predictable than bucks are. And that's why I think a lot of guys worry too much about hunting a buck down and think less about does. I know people that, they got trail camera pictures. What'd you get? Just a bunch of does. Well, I'm just like, cool. I got a bunch of does on my camera because that's what the bucks are going to be looking for. I mean, if you're, and now maybe not in early October, but when you're hunting during the rut, the pre-rut or whatever, or even after the rut, those bucks are looking for those does. And if you know where those does are, I have a couple farms that I hunt and some public property where there's just small sections of thickets and some more open stuff. And them does, well, day in and day out come to those little tiny spots. Now, back when I was younger, I didn't know any better. I would whack those does because I wanted some deer meat, But then as I started learning, leave those go. You know where they're bedded. You can hunt on the trails that they're walking. And then when November comes around, the bucks are going to come around looking for them. And you get a situation where you got a bunch of mature bucks and their territories overlapping. You darn well know that they know where all those does bed at. And not only do they know where they bed at, but I swear to God, they know when they come into heat.
Yes.
That is why I think you can explain why on the 15th of October, this buck shows up every year. And on the 25th of October, this buck shows up every year because those does are coming in the heat at different times, different doe groups, you know. And they, you know, ever watch, you know, big does in a situation where they're feeding in a field or something? That big doe is going to walk up to another doe and crack her right upside the head. She doesn't want her over in her, you know, her area. You know what I mean? They're like that, a little bit territorial when it comes to their bedding too. They might all be bedding within the same 50 acres, but this doe group's going to be on this side and this doe group's going to be on that side. You know what I mean? So you got to keep all that stuff
That's
in mind when you're hunting, for sure.
That's a really good point, not only when you're hunting, but also when you're the point about cameras, because I think everybody's guilty of just going through and deleting pictures of does. And I think maybe, you know, depending on the time of year, that's probably okay. But, you know, when deer are starting to be more social and starting to use scrapes, like there's a lot of information there that you can still get from does and from fawns. There was a period last year when we were, you know, pulled a couple cards and camera was on a primary scrape. There was a yearling, not a fawn, but a yearling coming in, working a scrape, and then all of a sudden one buck shows up. $2, $3, $4, $5, and then all of a sudden they're there for 2 or 3 days, fighting, chasing, and this was actually happened December 1st and January 1st.
Yeah, they were on her.
Two different does, but that's something that I'm guilty of it. I've done it for the longest time. Just go through and delete pictures or does, whatever. I don't need to pay attention to them, but understanding that bedding structure or hierarchy with doe family groups around food is. I mean, if you're hunting a rut, like that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the key is if you can figure out which does are coming into heat at which time, then you know that you can hop these areas. And I've tried doing that before, and it does work. But you know, it's you can't always time everything out perfectly. That doe could have got shot, you know, the year before. You don't know for sure, but you know, it's definitely worth a try. Right. It's good information to have for sure.
What's we're gonna jump a little bit, but what's your opinion on the moon? Moon phase, transit times. Does it matter?
Well, you know, I don't really I mean, I know that there's a lot of people that go by the moon, and after listening actually to that, your what was it, your Cribs episode where the guy was talking about new moon in October?
Damien Riffle.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. You know, I was trying to relate that to some of the stuff I've noticed on trail cameras. When I heard him say that, I was thinking about that, you know. But I really don't go by the moon. I put it this way, I don't hunt by the moon. I don't go for the red moon or anything like that. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm not saying that it isn't true. I'm just saying that that's just not the way I hunt. I hunt when I can, you know, and maybe I'm doing something wrong that way. But I can tell you that both the 5.5-year-old I shot in 2016 and 8.5-year-old I shot in 2018 were both on full moons in the evening. Or one was in the morning, one was in the evening. Okay. But they were both on full moon, so they were out moving, you know what I mean? So I've heard a lot of guys say they don't want to hunt a full moon for whatever reason. I mean, if I'm off and I can go, or even if I'm not off and I can go, I'm going to go hunting whether the moon's full, new, I don't care, waning, waxing, whatever.
Yeah.
All that.
No, there's, a lot of guys talk about hunting a full moon midday because deer are out all night because of the brightness and they're back to bed early, you know, early before the sun comes up, and then they're that feeding or 5-time feeding period, the hours are just shifted. So the midday movement's supposed to be really, really good. But everyone has an opinion on it, and it's like there's nothing really scientific or factual that says, okay, well, when you have an overhead moon or transit times, you know, 2 hours before sundown, like deer are on the feet.
Yeah. I guess I haven't tracked that enough, and maybe I should have, but the thing of it is with me is another thing I probably didn't mention in the Cribs episode or, you know, so far here is a lot of the bucks I've shot, my nicer ones have been like between 9 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So I'm sitting all day anyway. You know, I'm an all-day sitter. You know, sure, it gets boring. You know, you got to keep alert, you know. But so I have the opportunity to actually write that stuff down and keep track of it if I was to do it. You know, I just never have gotten around to it. I mean, I just the last few years started writing down every single time I'd get pictures of certain bucks, you know, so that I could try to keep track of where they're at, when they're there, you know, certain times, you know, which winds and stuff like that. So it's something I should probably put into the game here and check out here this season is keeping in mind, you know, with the moon, you know. if the, like you're saying, the new full moon, is that making them move more in the middle of the day? It could be. I'm just not. I guess haven't been paying enough attention to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things it feels like it's almost impossible to figure out, right? I mean, you have like I'm not a fisherman, but you have like the fishing charts where the feeding times are based off the lunar cycle or the transit times, and the fishing's supposed to be better in certain hours of the day or whatever. But like when you're in the whitetail woods, you're like most guys are already looking at the weather, right? I mean, they're looking for hunting those cold fronts on the front end or the back end. Yep. So is it like what is causing the move? Is it the moon? Did a coyote just come through and bump that deer? And,
exactly.
Like you just don't know. Like
there's so many things so many variables that come into it. Especially when you get a buck that comes cruising from you never seen before. Where'd he come from?
Yeah.
Is he moving because the moon is up, or did he just get the shit kicked out of him by a buck a half a mile away, and he came? Now he's over here.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's and then there's just so many different perspectives and like without any science really backing it up, it's like, all right, well, you have some of the best whitetail hunters in the world live and die by the transit times of the moon or the lunar cycle, but there's nothing there like you can
no proof other than the ones that they're killing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess it says something for it. It's definitely part of the equation, I would say.
Yeah, so it's probably lower. I mean, you're basically hunting when you can, whether the weather's right, whether the wind's right, whether, you're just – I guess you probably have enough stands and setups that you always have a spot that's right, for the deer with the wind. But as far as weather and everything, you just hunt when you can.
I got places I can go for every situation. Now, if you could figure out with the moon when these does are going to come into heat, that's all you really need, to kill a big bruiser buck. But, I guess it's just not possible. But I guess maybe I put too much into hunting does over bucks. But, I just think that's what you need to know is when the does are coming into heat. Probably explains why you have them certain times of the year. I mean, I've gotten pictures of fawns in late March before on one farm I hunt in Ohio. So you got to figure that doe had to have been in heat sometime in September. Okay.
180 or 100, what is it? Gestation periods 192 days, something like that.
202, I think.
Oh, is that 202?
Okay. But so that tells me, if I got pictures of a fawn that was just born like March 29th, and then I got pictures of fawns that were born sometime in late April, then I got pictures of fawns that were born in early May, mid-May, June.
Right.
Okay. That tells you that these does are coming into heat in different times in different areas. I mean, that's the information that you got to try to decipher if you want to try to get ahead of a buck, I think.
100%. 100%. Is there, we had a previous guest on that had talked about, and I think he pulled this from Adam Hayes, but bucks going back to like their summer range in a certain period during early October to kind of check on does. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Well, like I said, most of the places I hunt a lot. I hunt creek systems. I like places with oxbows, beaver dams, swamps, not so much cattail marshes. I don't hunt that often. Mostly beaver dams. Just anywhere where I can cross water to get to where I'm hunting, because that puts me away from 99% of the hunters. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I guess in that situation, because I think all the bugs in that, and it isn't really the preferred food, is the bucks really aren't around. So a lot of my buck pictures really aren't on the, like in the summertime, I don't get a whole lot of pictures of bucks in velvet unless I'm hunting farm country now, but I'll have the camera either on a soybean field or clover or alfalfa or whatever. And, usually, sometimes those bucks will stay there all year long. Sometimes they'll come back later on, but I don't, I guess I would, to answer your question in a shorter way, I guess I don't get enough buck pictures in the summertime to, really know one way or the other about it. You know what I mean?
Right. No.
I mean, I've had that happen. Like I was telling you in the Cribs episode, that one buck that I shot here was like a mid 150s. I ended up shooting him with the muzzleloader. He was around in August, and then he like totally disappeared, and then he came back in December. So then I started trying to hunt him down by following his tracks to figure out where he was bedded. And then in that second gun season, that 2-day gun season, I ended up, stocking up on one of the bedding areas he was in and seen him laying there and shot him in his bed.
Talk about, you've been pretty successful at that. Talk about that process of still hunting as far as finding a track, first of all, I guess, cutting a track, knowing whether or not it's a good track, buck track, and then just the details that go into, okay, I think that this deer's 500 yards away, I can go fast. I think this deer could be within 200 yards, I need to go slow.
Well, that's a situation where, you definitely don't want to hunt the deer with the wind blowing towards him. So, you know what I mean? But a lot of times what I'll do if I have a tag during gun season, especially in PA, is you can use a rifle so you can shoot them from a little bit further. I know how you can now. I always just hunt it with a muzzle loader inline over there. But what I would do is I would drive the property first. Like, I'm not going in and sitting there in the morning waiting for it to get light out. And sitting and waiting. I drive and I look for tracks crossing the road in the snow. Okay. And I've shot them before without snow, but that's what I usually will do. I'll go and I'll look for tracks. And when I find tracks that I think looks like a mature buck track to me, and it may not be a mature buck, but and then I'll try to I'm thinking to myself right away, okay, where could he be bedded at? If I haven't been in the area before, or if I don't know it well enough, I'll get out, my phone and look on there and try to figure out where the bedding can be. But I will try to then get, with the wind advantage, either a crosswind or have the wind blowing in my face, try to sneak into that bedding area. And when I still hunt, I walk slow, and I'm talking slow. I take a step and I stand there and I glass and I take another step. It's minutes, So, like I said, that one buck that I shot over on game lands in Pennsylvania with the gun took me 6 hours to kill him, jumping him from bedding area to bedding area. I take my time. So you just definitely want to, try to keep the wind in your advantage, and you want to know where the bedding area is. I don't usually just follow the tracks right to the deer, because that's almost impossible. They're going to make a loop, and people call it JHook or whatever, but any mature buck, that has a, worth his salt, is going to watch his back trail. So they will come up and then they will bed and watch down, and they will be able to smell anything coming at them. They're going to be able to see. So you just have to, it's trial and error. It doesn't work all the time, but I've shot probably 4 or 5 nice bucks right in their beds, so it can't be done.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. The JHook thing is, it's interesting. Like, everyone's been talking about, that's like one of the bedding cornerstones, right? Deer, how they come in and use a JHook. And I actually think the deer JHook probably in other situations too, to gain thermals or winds or whatever the situation calls for. But I didn't pick up on the back trail thing probably until, I don't know, 7-8 months ago. Like, they're basically leading, and this is how, like, somebody was talking about predator hunting and how predators hunt whitetails, predation. And that's what really put like A and B together for me, is the deer are basically setting up their track. So if something was following them, it's going to put them in a spot where they can see them. So that was like one of the things I was like, oh.
Well, they will walk a long ways before they decide to bed, though.
Right.
Because when you get on that track, I'm not good enough that, like these guys out in New Hampshire or whatever, I can't even remember their name, Benoits or whatever, that they would, they'd look at the track and it'd be like 200-pound buck. He was here at 4:15 in the morning with you know what I mean? I can't do that, but, I can, make an educated guess. But I know that a lot of times I've followed tracks where I was sneaking along for hours and hours and hours, thinking that any minute I was about to shoot a big buck, and I never ever ended up seeing him or jumping him out of the bed. So that, it's just, it's I wouldn't say that it's something that you can do and count on to work for you all the time, but it's definitely, it will work. You just got to keep at it, So maybe I've done it. Killed so many nice bucks doing that because I've done it a lot, but when I'm gun hunting, I don't want to just sit down. Okay, so even if there's no snow, I'm still hunting. I'm walking, and I'm trying to still hunt in bedding areas or on transitions, and I'm trying to pick out a deer that either just stood up out of its bed and saw me, or that is still bedded down. That's what I want to do. I don't want to sit in a tree stand, try to shoot a deer with a gun. I'll sit in this tree stand all day long with a bow. It doesn't bother me. But with a gun, I think that I need to be moving, to get my odds up there. So that's what I do.
No, that makes sense. We're closing in on about 50 minutes, so we'll start to get this thing wrapped up here. One thing that I guess in the last several weeks we've been asking people and answering it ourselves is, I guess in the last 7 days, what has been your favorite piece of content you've consumed? So that could be a book, it could be a magazine, could be a TV show, podcasts, YouTube, could be hunting, could be non-hunting. Like, what do you got?
One of the best things, and I guess the last 7 days, was the whitetail cribs that you did when I told you what that guy was talking about there with the new moon.
Yeah,
that was one of the most interesting things that had my mind going, for several hours thinking about that. So. Cool. It made me think to myself, maybe I better do a little bit more hunting in October, and I don't have to sit at every one of my kids' football practices the whole time, maybe, so.
Well, we've been doing that for several weeks now, and you're the first person who has said whitetail cribs. So Cameron's over there shaking his fist like, yeah, giving you a.
Psych, no, it was truth from the stand. No, I'm just kidding.
Clint, Clint and I are gonna meet up next weekend, and Cameron. 3 of us did a little bit of scouting, so we're excited to do that. But I guess answer that content question for myself. I'm about finished with Mark Kenyon's book, and I just forgot the name of it. That Wild Country.
Yeah.
So I have like 20 pages left, but did a bunch of reading this week. Well put together. If you don't have the book or haven't heard of it, it's definitely something to check out. It's very well put together, very well written. There's some funny personal stories. Mark does a very good job of being humble in that. I'm not really sure how to describe it. He tells several stories, probably more than several, a bunch of stories of him basically screwing a lot of stuff up. So whatever you want to call that, he does a good job of humanizing himself, I guess, while, giving a brief history explanation about public lands and legislation and where we are in the current state, where we are moving forward. So a bunch of good stuff there. I would definitely recommend, if anyone's into hunting public land or wants to know more about that situation, to pick a copy of that up. So
I've heard of that. I have to check it out.
It was a good book, yeah. Very good book. So, all right, we're 52 minutes. That's it. We're going to wrap this up. We jumped around a bunch, but I think there was a lot of good stuff in there. And I think we're probably close enough where we might have to get you in the office once or twice or something and do a studio record at the office, or maybe make a trip. Maybe make another trip back up here. So,
like I said, I'm always over in not too far from you where I'm hunting at in Ohio.
Right.
So I'm in the area every once in a while.
Yeah,
probably like once a week or every couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, we'll have to make this. We'll have to do this again. So, if anyone wants to learn more about you or find you or talk to you, is that a possibility?
Well, yeah, I'm on Facebook, just under Mike Perry. I also have a YouTube channel that I tried to start, Whitetails 24/7, 365. My problem is I don't have a good camera. I use my cell phone, and I don't know how to edit. So whenever I figured that out, I figured that my kids here, once they figure out editing software, then we can do more. But I have some stuff out there that people can watch. What I do is I go over my setups. Like, I'll actually show you where the tree is that I shot a buck out of. Not all of them were like that, and then I'll tell why I'm hunting there in situation, So why I'm hunting there, what the reasons are, when and how I'm accessing it and stuff like that. So,
very good.
There's not a lot of them on there, maybe 12 or 15 or something like that, but I'm hoping to get more going with it. It's just, just busy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
it's the YouTube thing can come. It's quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can consume a lot of time, but that's super cool. So yeah, if you want more of Mike, definitely check out the YouTube channel, Facebook, and I'm assuming that we'll have another episode here in the near future, maybe come fall. But Whitetail Cribs will be out, so make sure you check that episode out. There are a lot of other good tactic type stories on the Whitetail Cribs. And with that, we will get wrapped up. If you haven't left us a written review, please do so. It helps a bunch, and we are greatly appreciative of that. And we will talk to you next week.